What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devil Royale YouTube channel. Today, I am going over my top 50 in the 2025 NFL draft. This is something I don't normally do this early because none of these grades are final, and I'm about to talk about my process. But it is about that time to start looking at the 2025 NFL draft. We've been doing it on our quarters podcast, which you can find some of those videos here, but it's in podcast form. But these are all mine. These aren't Randy and Kevin. So we're going to go through all of that today. But first, I do want to talk about what this is and what this isn't. So my big boards are constructed as if they're just a raw talent evaluation. So this isn't a draft pick projection, as you can see with the number one player. If you looked at the thumbnail, it's not altered for positional value. Once again, you can see with that first overall player, and none of these grades are final. I have a production grade that I wait until the very end of the season. I put a ton of different components into all of those for each position. So none of these grades are final, but these are just the raw talent evaluation film grades that I've got so far. I've evaluated over 100 players so far, so we're going to drop a top 50. This is the grading scale. So once again, this is all of these grades are coming in without the production. So really this is for future use, but I do have this grading scale. I don't go round by round essentially. So you'll hear a lot of people say that I've got, 25 first round grades. I would say I have, 25 to 30 NFL starter grades or something like that, or NFL starter or higher. So that's kind of the methodology here. Let's get into it. So number one, Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise State. I think he's been the Heisman winner this year. But when you watch the film, he is I wouldn't call him generational because I think that word is overused. But as far as like translatable skills that he can take to the NFL level, I think he's got all of them. He runs with power. He runs with good burst, good vision. He sets up blocks. He's got good long speed. There's really nothing to complain about with Ashton Genty. I guess you can maybe knock his receiving profile this year, but then you go back to the 2023 film and it's all there. So he is my number one player. He's not going to get drafted number one overall, and he might not get drafted in the top 10. He's a running back. This is a positional value type of thing. But as far as talent goes, I think he's the best player in the draft. Number two, Walter Nolan. So this one's going to be a little bit off of consensus. I know, as you can see down there at 4, I have Mason Graham, but I think Walter Nolan is as close to a blue chip player as we've seen at the defensive tackle position. He's an incredibly versatile kid that can play as a 3 tech, as a 5 tech. He has the strength to play nose tackle, and he's winning a lot with power and just having really, really strong hands and good burst. And I think a lot of people are going to knock him for not having a whole lot of pass rush moves, but man, the power and and the ability to get to the quarterback from a defensive tackle position, it looks special to me. So he right now he is like right behind Ashton Genty, and debatably could overtake him. I don't think so because I think Genty's production grade is going to be pretty good, but Nolan has been really, really good this year. We'll see if he declares. He's a junior, so we'll see if that happens. Travis Hunter here, cornerback from Colorado. Everyone knows who Travis Hunter is by now if you're following college football or the NFL draft. I have him graded as a corner. I think if I graded him as a wide receiver, he'd be lower. So that's why I'm grading him as a corner. I think the instincts are just too elite to pass up. I think he should be a top 5, top 6 pick in this draft, despite playing a position that, doesn't have as much impact. Now, could some team decide to draft him as a wide receiver and use him as a corner sparingly? Maybe, but I just personally think that someone's going to use him as a corner and then have a package for him on offense, which is super valuable. We'll see how it translates. Playing both sides at the NFL level. I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to dominate both sides as he has this year, but still a very, very good player. Mason Graham here for defensive tackle from Michigan. This is a player that when you tossed on the Michigan film last year, he was popping all over the place. And then this year he took a little bit to get going, but it's been really good the last few weeks. He's just kind of unblockable at this point. He is one of those defensive tackles that can get to the quarterback from the interior. So him and Nolan are the top 2 defensive tackles, in my opinion, as far as getting to the quarterback goes. As you can see, I have another one that's a little off of consensus here. I really like this defensive tackle class, and we'll get into that as we go through this. But Mason Graham, top 4 player, in my opinion. Will Campbell, offensive tackle at LSU. I know some people are concerned about his length, concerned about his size. I think it's all fine. I think it's gonna be okay because his footwork is so good, his ability to really counter the counters. I think his hands are really, really effective. I think he's got really good technique and good balance, and so this is a player that in an uncertain offensive tackle class, and you'll see where I have some of these other guys. This is a guy that I think is going to go super high because I think he's got all the intangibles. Even if that arm length is going to come in a little short, he reminds me a bit of Rashawn Slater in that regard. He's just a super athletic kid that does really, really well in all facets of the game. Number 6, Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle from Ohio State. So this you're probably not going to see him this high on anyone else's board, but when I watch that film, I think the main concern that I have with him is can he stay healthy? Because he has missed some games here and there, but when he's out there, he is a run stuffing defensive tackle. He's got incredible agility for a guy that's as big as he is. He can get to the quarterback pretty well, definitely not as well as Graham or Nolan, but enough where I'm like, okay, he's probably a 3 down guy. You can play him at nose, you can play him at 3 tech. I think those can both work. So he's one of those players that I think is going to rise a little bit as a lot more eyes get on him, and as Ohio State gets into some of the nitty gritty down this playoff stretch that I assume that they will be in. Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan, is my number 7 player. That seems pretty low, and honestly, I was a little shocked that he was that low. But honestly, with some of these film grades right now, like he's tied with Tyleik, but because I like Tyleik, I put him at 6. Will Johnson is, I think you can make an argument that just on pure cornerback play, and if you aren't factoring in the wide receiver stuff for Travis Hunter, and the two-way capability, I think you can argue that Will Johnson has the best corner film. I think he is scheme versatile. I think he's really, really good at man coverage. Travis Hunter's a better zone coverage player for sure. But Will Johnson's been really good at ball hawking when he's in zone as well. I think he's got really good ball skills, but the mirroring ability in man coverage is what puts him here. I think he's a really, really talented player that should go in the top 10 this year. Abdul Carter, edge from Penn State, here at number 8. Kid that I was kind of low on this year because we hadn't really seen him be a pass rusher full time. He was a linebacker. They transitioned him to edge rusher this year, and what we've seen so far is okay. He's a quick learner, and he's going to be a dominant edge at the NFL level. I think as he continues to learn, like his toolbox isn't super vast right now. He's got a spin move. He's got like a lot of outside moves. He doesn't really have anything going to the inside. I think he's still working on building strength coming from linebacker. He's not a weak kid by any means, but he's definitely one of your smaller edge rushers as far as like power goes. I think he's got incredible bend though. He's an elite athlete. A lot of people say he reminds them of Michael Parsons, and I think you can see that on the film this year. I don't think he's quite there yet, but I think there's a ton of upside with him, and he's my edge one as of right now. Number 9, Malachi Stark, safety from Georgia. This is a kid that's just been consistent since he came to college football, and I don't think it's ever going to stop. He's just great in every facet of the game. He's a good tackler. He's great in coverage. I think he's got really, really good instincts, and then that allows him to have elite range as a safety. So in a safety class that I like some guys. We'll get into, I think one more made my top 50, and maybe that's the problem is only one more made the top 50. So Malachi Stark should go pretty high in this draft as well. Tedero McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. If you've been following this channel, we've talked about him a ton, but I think he's clearly the best wide receiver in this class. He's got a hint of Mike Evans to his game. He's got a hint of Drake London to his game. He's really, really good at the catch point. He's a really good ball winner, but he's got good separating skills as well. So Ted McMillan, I think that he's going to be a really good NFL player and can be a number 1 at the NFL level, which I think is super important when evaluating wide receivers. Tyler Booker, offensive guard from Alabama. It's been an up and down year, but I just can't shake the upside when he's got that much athleticism. Some of the pass blocking work has been really good, and some of the run blocking stuff has been a little iffy. But I think the reason I keep him here and I'm still evaluating him as a top 15 player is because when you have that athleticism and you can move like that, you can be taught the technique of being, patient as you're trying to identify guys to block downfield. I think he lunges a bit, he gets off balance, but I think he's going to continue improving that. So I think we'll see a little bit more of him with Alabama being good down the stretch here too. So excited about watching the rest of his film. He might not declare that for what it's worth. I think he could go back, but who knows with that Alabama team right now. Uh, Deion Walker, defensive tackle from Kentucky, is still my number 12 player. I know he's had kind of like some of these guys an up and down season where we haven't quite seen the elite growth, I guess, from Deion Walker. But when you're 6'6" and 360 or whatever he's actually listed at this point, and you can move like that, it's just special. It's rare. I think he's got a long way to go to really hit this potential, but I would just project that happens at this point, just with his build and everything. So, exciting player. Like I said, I love this defensive tackle class. I'm gonna rave about it for months and months and months. So, I'm sorry if you get tired of me talking about defensive tackles as we go through this and on our podcast and everything like that. So, number 13, Donovan Jackson, offensive guard from Ohio State, but also put some really good offensive tackle film out there against Penn State, which I thought was a little surprising, honestly, because the way I had evaluated him at first was, maybe the foot speed wasn't always there. And then he went and played tackle. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, if we continue to see this, this could be like an Elijah Vera Tucker type range where he played tackle, he played guard. His best film was probably at guard. But that versatility can boost a guy's draft stock. And I just think he's a really good player. I think he's a definite starter at the NFL level. He's got really good athleticism. He's sound in each facet of the game. So Donovan Jackson, top 15 player for me. Michael Williams, the edge from Georgia. A little, I don't really know, actually. I don't really know what people are thinking of him right now. I think it's been a bit disappointing because I expected him to take a massive leap forward. But also, when you watch the film, he's doing a lot of really good things still. And I think the main thing that pops out with Williams is his length. I mean, he's able to really get around offensive tackles because of his length. He's an elite athlete, and I'm talking like probably will push like close to a 10 on the relative athletic score. So I think this is a player that NFL teams are going to say that's good enough film. He's a great athlete, and we're going to take the upside shot on the traits player. I think I tend to lean that way too with my edge rushers. Is traits are important. Nicholas Singleton, running back from Penn State, once again not adjusted for anything. So I am not, gonna just push the running backs down because I know they're not going to go inside the top 32. Nicholas Singleton to me is an NFL starter, a 3-down guy, a workhorse type of player that you can get out there. He doesn't get the workload because Katron Allen, Fat Man, like they like to call him at Penn State, he gets a lot of work because he's also a good running back in his own regard and a much different running back. But Singleton has gotten so much better at setting up his blocks between the tackles. I think he's got the elite athleticism that you're looking for. And one of those guys that is a game-changing running back that you would, grade this highly. So Singleton's progression this year, I think his hands have been really good. So to me, he looks like a 3-down guy that I think is going to be an NFL starter for a very long time. Deontay Lawson, linebacker from Alabama. Once again, I'm kind of on an island with him, but I just really, really value how good he is at run fitting and getting in the run game better than most linebackers, and especially in this day and age and where the NFL is going. I think this type of linebacker is what we're going to be looking for. He's an elite athlete. I think he's shown some stuff in coverage where you're not looking at him as a liability there. A lot of people like his teammate Jihad Campbell a little bit more, but I'm more of a Lawson guy. I will talk about Campbell here shortly, though. 17 and 18, I'll just group these two together. Offensive tackle Josh Simmons from Ohio State and wide receiver Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State as well. These two, before Josh Simmons' injury, were playing some of the best ball on Ohio State's offense. Obviously, they've got a talented freshman that we'll talk about on one of these top 50s in a few years now. But Egbuka's really continued his good play. I think he's improved as a route runner this year. He has actually bumped himself up to wide receiver 2 for me. He was behind Luther Burden. We'll get to him in a little bit. But Ibuka has taken some steps forward to me, and when you combine that with the elite athleticism, he's going to grade out really well in the production stuff as well. I think NFL teams are really going to value that. I think he can play on the outside, but I think he's best as a slot receiver, but more in the vein of like a Keenan Allen or an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of player. And then Simmons, he had first round film before the injury, and I just don't know what's going to happen. I don't think he has eligibility left. Some of the injury waiver stuff can get a little confusing, so he might end up being allowed to go back. But if he declares in this offensive tackle class, that's a little iffy. Like I said earlier, I think he's a first round pick. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle from Michigan, second best defensive tackle on his team. He's like my DT5, I think, is how many I've talked about so far. But a really, really good player in his own right. I think this is one of those trait based projections with Grant because you see all of the athleticism, but you don't always see the, I guess the instincts or the understanding of where he needs to be at all times. I think sometimes he can shoot some gaps and put himself in vulnerable positions when he's defending the run. But I also think that he's taken some steps forward this year. So I still project him to be a really good starter at the NFL level. It's just I prefer the other four guys because this is an elite class. I always joke when we do mocks, like it's really tough to get all these defensive tackles in here, but also NFL teams kind of need defensive tackles. So we could see a huge first round full of defensive tackles this year. I'm more Ohio State players. I'm sorry, Michigan fans, and I'm sorry, whoever else is mad, but Ohio State has a lot of talented players. They're the best team in the country, in my opinion. I don't care about Oregon. I think Ohio State's going to beat them when they play again. But the two running backs to me are both quality NFL starters, 3 down guys at the NFL level. Judkins maybe less so, but I think he's a better runner. I definitely don't think he's the level of pass catcher that Travion Henderson is. That said, I think his running style, what Tank Bigsby is doing in Jacksonville, or what he was doing before this last week, is similar to what I think Judkins can be at the NFL level. I think he is one of those guys that just eats up a ton of volume. He's really improved. He looks a lot healthier this year, or maybe engaged because the Ole Miss stuff just wasn't working out. So I've liked what I've seen. I was lower on Judkins, to be completely honest. He was like my RB4 after summer scouting, or RB5 even maybe. And now he's up here in the top 20. And then Travion Henderson, I'll tell you what, the pass blocking from Travion Henderson is going to get him drafted a lot higher than a lot of people think. Even if the running hasn't been, elite as maybe we saw in his freshman year, it's still been really good. And when you can pass block the way he can, NFL teams are going to dig that. I haven't talked about a quarterback yet. For those of you that follow me on social media, you know that Drew Aller is my QB1. For those of you that don't, surprise, Drew Aller is my QB1. And I know that sounds like a, 4 clicks type of take. But when you really, really dig into the film and understand that Drew Aller is doing some really good NFL translatable stuff, he has the traits that pop off the page. He's got the big arm. He's got functional athleticism. I think he moves. He's moving a little iffy now because of the knee injury, but I think he generally moves well, and I think there's room for him to maybe even lose a little bit of weight. I think some of the weight that he's added has really helped him evade sacks. This last week against Ohio State wasn't so good on the sack front. I think he took 2 fairly bad ones, but when you watch that film, once again, everyone's going to point to this is dropping right after that game, and people are going to point to that game specifically. But when you watch that film, Ohio State was really good about double teaming Tyler Warren and understanding that no one else can get open on that offense against their secondary. So Ohio State did a fantastic job. Aller took care of the ball. I do not credit that interception to him. It was a perfectly placed ball that also wasn't credited as a drop. So interesting film for sure. We want to see a little bit better, but also when you look at NFL translatable stuff, I think Aller's got it. I think he can throw across the middle. I think he takes his checkdowns really well. I think he takes care of the football. I think he's a really good quarterback that people are kind of sleeping on right now. Another really good quarterback that just drives me nuts is Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami, who's in the Heisman conversation, but also throws across his body, across the entire field, like twice a game, and it drives me absolutely bonkers. Cam Ward, to me, looks so maybe Drew Aller is close to a Josh Allen. I don't necessarily think he's quite there yet, but I think that's your your hopeful outlook on Drew Aller, Cam Ward to me is the good version of Deshaun Watson before before the Browns decided to trade for him. But I think that's the type of style that Cam Ward plays. I think he's actually got a better arm than Watson. I think he's a little bit less accurate than Watson, and he's certainly more careless with the ball than Watson was, at least in college. I think when he got to the NFL, he started to do some of that risky stuff. I think we're going to see that from Ward. But this isn't a class that I'm vaulting the quarterbacks to the very top. The, last year was, Caleb, I think, was my number one player overall. And I Drake May was pretty close up there, but this isn't one of those classes to me. If Cam Ward sits until, because to be completely honest, I think Aller might go back to school. And if he does, good on him. He can continue developing. Ward's not going back to school, but if he sits until like pick 7, pick 8, he's not the first overall pick like we've seen in all these mocks. I won't be shocked at all. I just think this is a quarterback class that we're kind of squinting at and saying, oh, well, he can be an elite player. I just don't see it. I think there are some good starters here, but I don't think there are any elite players in this class. 24, Jahad Campbell. I talked about Deontay Lawson. Campbell is by far the better coverage linebacker. You see all of the athleticism, though, and you see a really good understanding of what is going on offense. So I think his gap discipline is really good. I think he's able to run fit pretty well. Definitely not as well as Lawson, but he's still a really good player. These are my top 2 linebackers in this class. I do really like them. I don't know if they'll get drafted that high, but they're my top 2 right now. All right, 25, Siobhan Revel Jr., the corner from East Carolina. This is one where we have verified athleticism, kind of. So even though he had a season-ending injury after balling out for, I think, 3 games at East Carolina, he won't be testing. And so I think a lot of people are concerned about his draft upside. I still think he's going to be a top 50 pick, even with the injury and not being able to test, because the film is really, really good. The length is really good. I think people are going to knock him in man coverage because we don't always see it. They do run a lot of zone, and I think his instincts really come into play. He's a good run-fitting cornerback. I think he likes to get dirty and get down and make some plays in the backfield too. But I think the length and the athleticism are going to go a long way in making him a really good man coverage corner. So I think maybe he can be a little hesitant in press, but this cornerback class is certainly not my favorite. It is definitely not my favorite right now. So Revel, I think, still has a chance at the first round. Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State, and Colston Loveland, tight end from Michigan, are the next 2. I do have Warren ahead of Loveland because of my preference. I think they have the same exact grade right now. And quite frankly, I think Warren's going to have a better production grade, which is why I just kind of have it like this right now. But Warren has kind of burst onto the scene this year, if you want to say, but there were signs all over the film last year. He's a really good blocker. He's an elite after the catch player. He's got really good routes. He's used as a quarterback sometimes, as a running back. They're doing Taysom Hill type stuff with Tyler Warren at Penn State, and it's cool to see. I don't necessarily know if an NFL team is going to do that with him, but I think he's going to be a really, really good tight end at the NFL level. And then Colston Loveland, probably the best move tight end in this class, to where you can just throw him in the slot. He can go win. He's not Brock Bowers. He's not going to be like that. But I think a TJ Hawkinson like upside to Colston Loveland is there. I think he's got a good catch radius. I think he runs really good routes. I think he's an okay blocker and can play inline. So I think he's going to get drafted pretty highly as well. Luther Burden, the third wide receiver from Missouri at 28, which I understand is low. But some of the stuff this year with Luther Burden, I don't know what's been going on. The yards after the catch has been down. Maybe he's not healthy, and maybe that's just, or maybe he's just saving himself for the NFL, because we know guys tend to do that. But something is not quite firing at the same level that it was last year. And so I have knocked him a little bit for maybe not necessarily effort, but just even some of the routes haven't been as clean this year. I think he's struggling a little bit more this year. So he's moved down my board from where I would have had him over the summer. Still a really good player. I still think that there's a ton of upside to him, and maybe it is just being checked out, and we're going to see better from him once he hits the NFL level. 29, Tate Ratledge, offensive guard from Georgia. This kid, to me, like, they've got 2 guards that I think could challenge for, like, top 50 selections, but Ratledge to me is a nasty, nasty player that can move players in the run game. He's got a really, really good build, but really good athleticism. I don't think he's the most elite athlete, but when you see him moving out in space and having the balance and the patience to land those blocks, you get really excited about what he can do in a pulling type of offense, which I think he will have run some form of that at the NFL level. I like this offensive guard class too. This is a really good interior offensive line class. So I'm excited to see, at least at the top, I'm excited to see where he ends up going in this year's draft. Nick Scorton, the edge from Texas A&M. This is a player that I saw over the summer, and I kept having to watch more because I just wasn't sure. I know there was production there. We Production at edge rusher is important, but it's also like you have to combine it with other things like bend or power. I think Scorton's got enough bend. I think he's certainly a powerful player, and I think that he just has a really, really high motor that helps him. I don't think he's like a 10 to 12 sack player at the NFL level though. And so that's why he's a little bit lower on my board right now. I think, he's got an opportunity to change that. He's graded out really well this year. But it's also been a little up and down. So we'll see how it all goes for Scorton, but I still like him as a top 32 player. My second safety here, Sebastian Castro, from Iowa. This kid has, I had his teammate Xavier Nwankpa a lot higher, and then Nwankpa hasn't been as good this year. So Castro, to me, if you toss on, if you're interested in watching, go watch the Ohio State film and watch Sebastian Castro. It is probably the best single game that I've watched of a safety yet this year. Just really, really sound as far as playing the run, playing in man coverage, having zone discipline. I think, there are times in this Iowa defense where they drop back into zone, and some of these players get a little frazzled if there are a lot of crossers and things coming across their face. Castro is as sound as I've seen, and especially when you combine it with the fact that he can also line up against your slot wide receiver and kind of take him out of the game. It's really good stuff. So Castro, to me, I think is on an upward trajectory. He is graded out really well. He might not go in the first round, and that's okay because once again, this is a big board. This isn't a draft projection here. 32, the last one I'm going to go deep into. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle from Oregon. Surprise, another defensive tackle. This is a kid that can just really, really rush the passer from the interior. I think I have some issues with his run defense, and maybe that comes with size. I think I want to say he's a little bit undersized. I don't know what his arm length is going to come out at, but I think it shows up when he's trying to defend the run. That said, some of his pass rush moves are as advanced as anyone in this class. I think maybe only Mason Graham and Walter Nolan, and maybe even just Mason Graham, have a better repertoire, a better toolbox to get to the quarterback. And so Harmon's been a big riser this year. I think I've seen him in a couple first-round mocks as well. So having a really good year. All right. The remainder of the top 50, I'm going to read off these names, and then I'm going to say like a quick thing, unless I'm kind of low on them. So Jalen Walker, edge from Georgia, really good player, really elite athleticism, elite bend, not much of a pass rush plan right now. I think there are times when he has one move and that wins. That said, I think I have concerns about his size. I just don't think the length is quite there with him, and it shows up when he's trying to defend the run or when he has to counter. If he gets an offensive tackle with super long arms, he can get taken out of games. We saw that especially against Florida last week, I think it was. It was tough. It was tough for Jalen Walker. So I have him graded as an edge though, because I think that's the place you're going to get the most upside out of him. But more in the Nolan Smith type of ballpark than I think what we've seen in some draft projections. 34, Kellen Banks, offensive tackle from Texas. I don't know. I just don't always see it with Kelvin Banks. I think the foot speed is a little iffy. I think the run blocking is kind of bad at times. I think he can really get out over top of his knees, and can be really unbalanced. And so I'm a little lower on him. I'm lower on this offensive tackle class though, so it is what it is. Uh, Deny Dennis Sutton, the edge from Penn State. If you've listened to the show, you know that I am super high on him. I've seen some like fourth and fifth round projections, but I just think when there's a kid this big that moves that well, they tend to do well at the NFL level. And maybe he's not. Maybe he's more of a 7 to 8 sack guy, but he defends the run really well. I think he's a great edge too for a team, and I think that gets undervalued often by NFL teams even, and really by NFL media. Benjamin Morrison, corner from Notre Dame, up and down year, out for the season. Don't really know what to do with him. I just think some of the stuff that was really, really good last year has been a little inconsistent this year. So, and then we're not going to see anything after that. So we'll see if he declares. He might go back. Luke Condra, the offensive guard from Cincinnati, this player moves, man. I've seen him pop up in some first round mocks, and so I had to get some eyes on him before I released this video. And he can move. He's a really fun player. I think he gets a little too excited sometimes, and certainly the competition level that he's playing could play a part in his readiness at the NFL level. But he's graded out really, really well for 4 straight years, and it shows up on the film. Just good athlete. I think he's going to test really well. Dylan Fairchild, another offensive guard from Georgia, probably a better pass protector than Tate Ratledge, but doesn't move as well in my opinion, so that's why he's a little bit lower. Isaiah Bond, 39, wide receiver from Texas, just an up and down year. It just hasn't been as good as I was hoping. I think he's going to be a better NFL player than he is a college football player, but I was hoping to see a little bit more from him this year. So he's down, 39, still a good player. 40, the player you guys have all been waiting for, I'm sure. But Shadur Sanders is in my top 50. He is my QB3 right now. He's got an opportunity to continue rising. I've been coming up, more on him almost every week. There's been some things where I'm still like, yeah, that's still concerning. But I do think that he is probably the most, bar for bar, I think he's the most accurate quarterback as far as ball placement goes. So I hope he proves me wrong and just vaults into the top 15, and we have a really good quarterback here. 41, Ariante Ursary, the offensive tackle from Minnesota. I got some eyes on him recently. I had to watch a few games because I like some of the stuff, and then there are times where he's just not very good at, getting his feet back quickly enough and can get blown by. So I think we'll need to see a little bit more from him, but I know people are excited about him. He seems like he's going to be a good athlete if he tests. So I'm excited to see what that can be. Cameron Williams, the offensive tackle from Texas. PFF just did a thing where Texas might have 2 first-round offensive tackles. I think those will both be overdrafts based on this board. I know 3 running backs aren't going, 4 running backs, whatever I had in the top 32 aren't going though. So, and I get that offensive tackle is a premium position, but Cameron Williams has a long way to go. Quite frankly, he is only up here because of the traits. I think the foot speed is really, really good, but there is certainly some. He needs to start more. He needs to play more football. Jonas Savanaia, the offensive tackle from Arizona. I think offensive tackle, offensive guard. I have him graded as an offensive tackle at this moment, but I think there's a chance that he plays guard at the NFL level. Just solid at everything, maybe not great at any one thing. And I think his pass protection has been really good this year. I think he moves fairly well. But I do wonder about his athleticism a little bit. We'll see. We'll see what comes from that. Josiah Stewart, edge from Michigan, 44 here, having a really, really great year. Just a little undersized, and I think teams are gonna factor that in. I factor that in because undersized edge rushers don't often do as well at the NFL level. If you look at some of the top sack getters at the NFL level, they're all pretty big and pretty long, and almost all of them are a mix of power and finesse. And these two, including Donovan here, I don't even. I'm gonna butcher his last name. I haven't yet learned how to pronounce that. Ezuraku, something like that. I'm sorry, Donovan. These are 2 players that I think just are a bit undersized and don't quite have the length or the power to win consistently at the NFL level. I think they can be good edge rushers, and I think they can rack up a few sacks. Josiah Stewart reminds me of oh god, kid from Oklahoma a few years ago that, he was undersized, but he's been effective at the NFL level. I think we could see that with both of these guys, but I don't know. I'm not as high on them as maybe their production would suggest. Garrett Nussmeier down here at 46, my QB4 at this moment. I think he's going back to school. I think him and Aller probably do go back to school, so that'll thin out this quarterback class pretty drastically. Jahdae Barron, a corner from Texas, really, really good player that has done a lot of really good things. It's just he's I think he's best as a zone coverage corner, but then there are times where, against Georgia, he was really, really good at every facet of the game. Maybe he's a big game player. And if he's a big game player, I think Texas has a lot more big games ahead of them where he could really rise. And quite frankly, I kind of anticipate that. So we'll see how it goes. Jack Sawyer, edge from Ohio State, just once again, one of those guys that he's going to do all of the little things. He's going to be a really great edge two for you. So I think that he can get, higher sack totals at the NFL level. I think he's a really, really great athlete, but he is a strong edge setting edge rusher that I think will play as a starter at the NFL level. James Pierce Jr., edge from Tennessee. I know that's low. I understand. And some of the games lately have been better, but I just see, some of the same with Josiah Stewart and Donovan E. My boy Donovan E over there at Boston College. It's just this. He's kind of, he seems small out there. He's a thin kid, and there are times where I think power and length are really going to get to him, and I get a little bit concerned about that. And I know he's got a better set of pass rush moves, I think, but he doesn't always have the pass rush plan, and we still haven't seen all of that this year. I'm hoping that the bend and everything translates. It tends to, but I would like to see a little bit more development before I start bumping him way up, to where he's been. I mean, I saw him first overall in a mock this morning, so I can't get there with him. And then 50, Jonah Coleman, running back from Washington, the last running back in the top 50 here. Jonah Coleman, I haven't seen him projected in the second or third round much. I don't know if that's oversight or if like everyone assumes that he's going back to school because he's just a junior. But man, if I'm not watching like a knockoff version of Ashton Genty with Jonah Coleman, just a super, super explosive kid with a really good ability to break tackles. I think he runs between the tackles well, but he's also got a lot of speed out there. He's a smaller kid. I think he's probably going to measure 5'8", 5'9". He's built though. It's not like he doesn't have mass. I'll bet he's like five. I think he's listed at 5'9", 215 or 220 or something like that. And he runs like it. So I don't have any concerns about that. I think he can be a 3-down type of guy at the NFL level, or at least, your first and second down carry eater. This running back class is very, very good, folks. It will be drafted a lot higher, I think, than a lot of these running back classes have been. So that's my top 50. Like I said, I've graded over 100 players. As I get more players, this board will change. We're still very early in the 2025 NFL draft, but I like giving a little bit of a status update before we get into the nitty gritty of college football playoffs and things like that. There's a lot more football to evaluate, so these grades will change. Every grade pretty much changes every week. So, I'll have another update probably in December, and then we'll keep rolling from there. So, if you've stuck with us, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.